The first thing I want to do is thank everyone who's taking their time to share some actionable insights for a small business owner, particularly for the holidays. But what I really like about this is that you can probably take these tips that we're about to discuss and use them beyond the holidays. So it's something that you can continue to build on after learning this stuff today. So with me, I have Stacy Tuschl, Brittany Krystle, and Stephanie Schwartz. I'm going to ask y'all to introduce yourselves as how you've come to where you are today, and what maybe your expertise is in terms of small business and advertising and marketing and all that good stuff. So we'll start with Stacy.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I'm Stacy Tuschl, and I own two performing arts academies here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I have been doing them for about 17 years, and we have those two locations where we have about 1,000 music and dance students that come to us every week, about 45 employees. I also do a little bit of rental properties. We have some investments in residential and commercial real estate, and then I also have an online consulting business where I help other business owners.
Wow, awesome. All right, next is Brittany.
So I am a personal brand expert, and I specialize in helping entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial-minded people grow influence online that gets real-life results. I'm also the host of the Beyond Influential podcast, which has been a top 20 management and marketing podcast. And I really got into this because I've worked with now some of the biggest names in the online space. Some people might be familiar with a Gary Vaynerchuk and a Marie Forleo and a Tom Bilyeu. And honestly, I was in a place 10 years ago where I was a lawyer and I knew I hated it, and basically went through this evolution of learning content strategy and development through my time in the entertainment industry and then eventually into the space. And I've just seen what power is available if you're building your personal brand online to build businesses, to create businesses, to leverage people's personal brands to help you grow your business. There's like an infinite amount of possibility and opportunity. So my business is teaching people how to do that for themselves and get what they want.
Awesome. And then Stephanie.
Hi, thank you, Jason. So I'm Stephanie Schwartz. I am the brand partnerships manager at Office Depot's headquarters in Boca Raton, Florida. So I have the unique privilege and honor to work with people like Stacy and Brittany and figure out how to bring brands with similar interests and similar customers together for a unified purpose.
What are your platforms of choice to direct digital, well, to use your digital content to bring in people into your stores?
Yeah, so I can jump in. So for my specific brick and mortar, we are heavily using Facebook and Instagram. LinkedIn is not something that we are using or have really kind of thought about it, but I can guarantee Brittany's going to jump in and say yes, but certain businesses definitely need to be on there. I think every industry is very different. So it's more about what is your industry doing and where are your customers looking for those services. But I would say we're definitely on Facebook and Instagram. And then for my online consulting business, we're pretty much everywhere because our client is on all of those platforms. So I'm not sure if Brittany wants to chime in on that for sure.
I definitely wanted you to take the brick and mortar piece first. So like Stacy said right off the bat, it is where your consumer is, whether that's your personal brand audience or the person who is actually walking in the door. As a business owner, you always need to be thinking about the end consumer. So you need to be where they actually, just are. For personal brands, I mean, obviously, she mentioned I love LinkedIn. I think that's great for any business owner to be positioning themselves. I know a lot of people, especially people who are brick and mortar, aren't thinking so much about their personal brand to build their business, and they're kind of leaving that on the back burner while they're doing their actual business. But like it has the friendliest algorithm right now, super strong SEO value, and just there's little things that you can do to position yourselves. As far as which platforms are my favorite for business owners in particular, 100% LinkedIn, even if you're an entrepreneur and you're not dealing with corporate at all, that's obvious. And then depending what your skill set is, and again, your audience, if you're a strong writer, some people wouldn't think about it, but like a Quora, if you're appealing to teenagers, then a TikTok. But for most people, it's going to be Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I want to chime into with LinkedIn because I love that you said that too with your personal brand. I'm in a unique situation where I have the brick and mortar small business, and then I have my personal brand. And I am on LinkedIn for my personal brand. And we've definitely had people message me for local opportunities, to be featured in certain papers or awards or things like that. So I do agree with Brittany, even just to put yourself on there as just a person, not your business, it's really helpful to make those connections as well.
Okay, and this is going to segue into what Brittany kind of just said, but I wanted to ask again. So, do you think you need a personal brand if you own a physical retail store?
I'm going to try not to go on like a really aggressive rant. There's a reason I made this my business. I can't think of anybody I've met, even in the last few years, that I have not Googled. You have a personal brand. It's not only a mistake in terms of growth and your opportunities and your options to not do it, but it is a liability to not control your options and your story. I mean, one bad review and that shows up in Google first. There's just so many different advantages. Even like I said, I know everybody's super busy, so I really do specialize. And not everybody can have a full scale content team for their personal brand. So if you're super busy, even just positioning yourself and like putting in your headline the local, like if you're in Newport Beach, making sure that shows up in your profile because of the SEO value of LinkedIn. Just when people search for you, it shows up and helps start attracting those right people. And obviously, just the personal brand in general, if you can put out any content, people who are interested in you will be interested in your business. And I mean, not every business ends up being successful. And if you end up pivoting, people will stay with you because they're invested in you as a person. When you're looking for employees, people are invested in coming to you. And it just helps and supports the entire business as a whole. And I think it just really humanizes it. I just think about all the brands that I follow on an Instagram or on any platform. It's the people that really intrigue me. On LinkedIn, it's not the company profile that does it, it's the people. So I really just think it's a missed opportunity to not at least position yourself online to protect yourself and then be putting things out there to try to attract those people in.
Gotcha. And to further that, you're talking about content.
Mhm.
What kind of content are you talking about? Are you talking about like advertisements, or are you talking educational videos? What is it specifically that you find that works for a personal brand?
I really think that for most people, it's uncomfortable to put yourself out there, especially in, just in any personal way. So I actually think for people who are business owners, it is way more comfortable to talk about the aspects of the business, not in a salesy way, just about, why you created the business. If you created a business, you really, I'm not going to swear, you really, really, really care about it. You've invested time and money in operations and how it works and into the culture and into the mission and how you're hired, like literally everything. There's a million things to talk about. And it's just kind of letting people in on those things or things that you've learned. Now, once you start to see it, things happen in your business each day that you're like, oh, this customer service, like this incident happened or this situation happened. That would be interesting for other business owners. So even just sharing and then seeing kind of who's out there. And then once you start sharing, you realize like, oh, maybe I can help other business owners, or oh, maybe I'm talking to my customer more, or oh, maybe I'm talking to this person. But I think in the beginning, to get that clarity, you kind of just need to put out a little bit wherever it's comfortable. And why I like LinkedIn is because it doesn't need to be something like YouTube, an aggressive video. It could be an article on the top 5 things you learned from starting a business, or those could just be 5 posts. Like really make it easy on yourself.
So play to your strengths, essentially. If you're a good writer, write those articles.
100%.
I want to chime in too, because I never would have ever thought, oh, I should do what Brittany is saying. So I want to talk to that person who's thinking she's wrong. I don't want to do this. So with me just happening to make the second business come to play, my brick and mortar has had so many advantages. So for instance, I had my bank, but a very well-known nationwide bank, see some of my videos on my personal brand, and they reached out and said, we're actually looking to feature some of our local small business owners. And a lot of times when we reach out to them, they're not interested in being interviewed. They don't want to be on video. And we see you do video, so it looks like you'd be comfortable with this. So they said, no guarantees, but we're going to pitch you. They pitched me. We got the feature. It was a gorgeous feature that we now have the rights to this video. They came and did all of the costs. Then that video, that company, that bank actually submitted me to be the 2019 Wisconsin Small Business Person of the Year. So because of that, me stepping out to do video, I was able to get the feature. Then that feature led to the award. So there's just so many things that have come out of my personal brand for my local brick and mortar business. It's incredible.
And just to speak to that too, and I'm glad you gave that example. Like, for example, on LinkedIn, like amount of people who are actually putting out content is like less than 1% of active users. Like even just putting out small amounts, like the visibility that you can get for yourself and your business, and even just sharing little insights, you don't realize the power of it. And I think people, the more you put yourself out there, people ask me about confidence all the time. It is about putting yourself out there, and that's how you develop your voice. And then it just gets better and better and better. And even the smallest thing, like Stacy said, you're like, oh, you put out one video. I don't know, I'm sure it was great content knowing Stacy, but you probably just thought like, oh, whatever. But people are paying attention to it and they do value it.
So now what we're going to do is talk a little bit about bringing digital with your local strategy. How do you get them in the door, or whether they're online or maybe just driving down the road?
One of the things I think Office Depot has been doing, which may seem silly, but is being really aware of the language that's spoken in an individual market. So we have particular markets throughout the United States. We have markets in Puerto Rico where they're bilingual. And yes, everybody can read English. Oh, my lights went off. Sorry. But putting flyers, radio, social media, translating that into Spanish, putting things with a local flair. If there's local sayings, we did this in Austin too, where we did banners and signage along the lines of that Keep Austin Weird vibe that really would resonate there, but maybe not so much in Newport Beach. So being really hyper local aware with whatever medium you're using to get people into your store or onto your website, just being aware of playing into that local feel.
I love that. It's always the us versus them thing, and like making people feel like it's the community. And obviously Stacey's going to talk a lot about the local strategies, but it is knowing your audience. And especially like with Office Depot, what I like about what you guys are doing is you are thinking about the local, because ultimately the people you're competing with are, like an Amazon business, and something that maybe might be efficient but doesn't have that personal feel. Or like for back to school, you actually go into the store and it feels like it's a completely different vibe. So really like playing to that. And then from my perspective, in terms of local, like I said, making sure that it's searchable, like any content that you make, that you're putting kind of the local spin on it. Or if you are in Newport Beach, you're making sure that people know you're OC based, Newport Beach. You can have different events and different things of that nature. But on Instagram, I've actually seen it work very, very well for people to be using those niche hashtags, like hashtag Newport Beach photographer, Newport Beach salon, just for those examples. Like I got married recently. I found my people not only looking online, because that's the first thing I do, but through those hashtags where it's like, oh, I'm getting married in Mallorca, hashtag Mallorca wedding photographer. Like just going down those rabbit holes, and not that many people actually do it, either because they don't think of it or don't think that other people would search for them. And then also, of course, from a paid media perspective, and I'm sure Stacy can talk to this too, Instagram and Facebook ads with different deals related to the community. I mean, the Facebook ads targeting is so fantastic. Like there's no reason you shouldn't capitalize on it.
Yeah, I definitely could not agree more with Facebook ads, Instagram ads. I think the biggest thing is because there's usually a disconnect, and a lot of small business owners are maybe good at certain areas, meaning they can attract people to their booth or attract people to their Facebook ad because they're going after something they think they want, but it doesn't necessarily lead to them actually selling something. They're just there for that free thing or that discount, that coupon code. So I think the biggest thing is ask yourself, what does your customer really want and what's going to excite them? But then how is it going to naturally lead to what you do? And we do sometimes a lot of free events. And we've realized by doing just having free events and bringing our community together, sometimes we're just attracting people looking for those free events. So we have to really kind of up level some of the stuff that we're doing by offering some paid events or maybe even some smaller ticket price point to at least attract a different, more qualified buyer, somebody who's actually interested in doing business with us. And we might have a smaller turnout when it's a paid event, but they're much more qualified, and our conversion rate can definitely skyrocket when we have that qualified buyer. So I would say test, right? Whatever it is you're doing. For my local dance studios, we do a free trial. It works really well because again, they're interested in a free dance class. So is it likely they want to maybe come back to take dance? Yes. But if I were to do a free tutu, people think, well, that makes sense. It's in alignment with the dance studio. Not necessarily though. They might just have a 3-year-old who loves to dress up and they're coming for the tutu and they're out, right? Or they already go to another local studio and they're just grabbing the tutu and they're going someplace else. So really ask yourself, who is the person? Like, what are you trying to sell? And how can we give them a little taste of it? And Facebook ads is a great way for us to do that. So we have a free trial. We also do an educational piece where we are attracting families. So we're thinking, what are families looking for in my local area? So we'll do a fall activity guide or a winter activity guide for your family. And we'll shout out 10 local businesses that we think you have to try out or go to, which is another great way, as we're talking about collaborations, right? Then they're sharing it out and they're grateful we've included them. So that's been a really great, very inexpensive Facebook ad for us.
Yeah, I completely agree with Stacy in terms of the building. Like in my head, I'm like, well, she can do sales, she can do events, especially community events. If you're local, like you want to be a pillar in that community. You should be the pillar in the community, the dance studio, the person in that area. And if you're leading the charge in terms of the business and providing that great service, and then also in terms of community, like you solidify your position. And then there are Stacy mentioned about the freebies. Kind of in my world and kind of the other side of her business, it's like, yeah, somebody might download for free, but that doesn't mean they convert. So it's like even doing something nominal, because if somebody pays $5, even let's say she throws an event for charity, but even putting in like $1 or $5 or whatever it is, once you put in a little, way more, they're likely to spend more. Also, just something as I'm thinking about the holidays, and I'm sure Stacy can speak to this too. I know everybody wants to compete with the like Cyber Monday and the Black Friday. What I like, at least for definitely smaller businesses that maybe don't have the ad spend to compete with, compete against an Office Depot or compete against these people, you have to think differently. You need to start thinking like, okay, well, if that's not the case, then my sale is going to be the week before Thanksgiving, or my sale is going to be in the in-between phase before like e-com ads really ramp up or whatever that is. So finding those pockets where it's not directly thinking about what your competitor is doing at those times, thinking about what you can do strategically so you can be seen.
I'll give an example of that. So one of the things that is really crucial for a local business, especially, is we want our current customers to tell their friends, right? So how do we get those referrals? So we do have like physical postcards that we'll actually give. And actually, I think it's in December, we have a postcard that says, give the gift of dance. So you can steal that for any industry you're in. And we give it to our customers to give their friend a free month of dance. And that last year was one of our biggest conversions in January, because their friend would come, try us out, and then they would purchase and continue to enroll for February. So, going to Office Depot, getting things like that where you can physically give them to your customers, to give them to a friend, has been huge. And on that postcard, when you said evoke emotion, on that postcard, it's more of a picture than there's text, but we have a gorgeous little picture of a little girl with her friend giving a big hug. So you can kind of show the emotion through those pictures and graphics as well. So that's been huge for us.
And I would also say, I guess, in terms of signage, you probably are really clear if you have a local business on kind of what your messaging is. Obviously, I say about this in personal branding, it's never about you. It's true for local business. It's always about the customer, but you also need to make sure that that messaging across the board is cohesive. So if you are running, if you're running Facebook ads, if you're running anything like that, you need to make sure that that matches up with the actual physical signage, and that's evoking the same type of thing and speaking to the same type of audience. Just like, you don't want anyone to be surprised. Everything across the board, people should feel like they know exactly what they're getting, whether they, meet you in person and then they see it online and see it online, go to you in person.
It helps to build that trust story. If what I see online matches what I see in store, matches what I get later in my email, it tells a brand story that's continuous and seamless, and customers really value that.
Yeah, there's nothing better. Like, you want somebody who's consistent, that you can rely upon that loyalty and trust. Like, that's how you retain people.
It's a bad first impression when you see a gorgeous Instagram account and then you walk into the building and it's like dingy and not clean, and you're like, this is not what I saw online. I mean, immediate first impression of wrong choice here.
So we were talking about content. We're going to loop a little bit back into it. I know definitely Brittany and Stacy, I follow your feeds. You put out a lot of content. And I'm not saying like, oh, you put out nonstop content. I'm saying you put out content that helps. But I'm curious what your processes are like, because as someone who also, one of my main focuses is content, I find it sometimes super overwhelming trying to get video, audio, and an article done on a consistent basis. So I'm just curious, what your content strategies, or what does it look like offline?
Well, I do want to say something, because this is something I literally get people coming to me every day who either don't start producing content because it's so daunting, or they heard someone online say they need to put out 20 pieces of content a week and this and that, this and that. You can make this your own. Like, basically, nobody that you see pumping out a ton of content doesn't have an agency or a team behind them. It is not possible to have full scale content on all of these platforms without a team. It's just really hard. I've been able to, like, because I've been part of so many teams, I've been able to do it myself for a long time prior to, this past year. But it's pretty much impossible unless that's like your actual area of expertise. So if you can even just take the time to, and I say batch content, but basically take like an hour on the weekend and maybe write out a bunch of like kind of tweets, or like the 5 tips that, the 5 tips related to growing a business that you can think of, and then use them throughout the week, or even post one a week. And then as you're growing, you'll have more ideas throughout the week, and save them in a notepad, just so you can kind of ramp up. Because I don't like telling people like, oh, you need to make, listen, like, the real advice is you should create one large piece of content and then break it down each week. And so you're not reinventing the wheel. And then as you keep doing that over the course of a month, you can remix all of those into future weeks and repurpose them. And so, that's very similar to what I do. I've been putting out enough content. I put out my weekly podcast. If each podcast is anywhere from like 20 minutes to an hour long, I have tons of quotes, tons of content, tons of things I can make into video, tons of things I can make into articles. But it starts with putting out one podcast and then thinking about it. And again, like, people are worried about it. Write 3 tweets a week, and then take a screenshot and put that on Instagram if it's related to the business. Like, just make it simple. I just don't want people to get caught up in it, because I can give you the like perfect process. But legitimately, I've worked on teams where people do all of their content at the beginning of the month. I've worked on teams where people are 2 months ahead. And I've worked on teams where everybody's pretty much doing it in real time or the week of. So it's whatever works for you and your system.
But do it. Just at least do
You
it.
just have, you do have to do it.
Right.
Yeah, and mine is very similar to Brittany. And, I actually was just out of town for 2 weeks, and then I come into another very busy travel season. So I had to, like she said, batch, and meaning like create a bunch to get me through when I was gone, so I could really truly take that break. So sometimes we're in more of a real time where she's saying, we're doing it maybe a week or 2 prior. And sometimes we're so far ahead because maybe I'm heading into summer or December and the holidays, and I want to take a break, and I don't want to have to do this every single week. But just like Brittany said, for me specifically, my one big piece of content for the week is my podcast. And then we do the same thing that she's saying. We take the Foot Traffic podcast and we take that audio, we strip it, we transcribe it, we rewrite it into a nice blog post. Now, what's nice is I'm not writing the blog post. All I'm doing is the podcast, because my team can now see what I said and see how I say it, write an email that has my words, the story that I said. People think I'm doing all of this stuff, but really, I'm just really focused on one core piece of content a week, and then the team handles the rest. And she's right. If you're watching anybody and thinking, how are they doing it? It's probably because there's a team behind them supporting them.
And for the personal brand, just so I am clear on it, like Stacy said, those, like, the great thing about the podcast is it's like, if somebody's writing it for me or writing my blog post or helping me send the email, those are my words. And so my voice, and I think that's very important to protect. But when it comes to, let's say you don't have the budget to hire an ads agency, so you're doing, content for your small business, the small business arena, at least you can plan out, when Thanksgiving's coming, when Christmas is coming. There are these seasonal things that are always going to be happening every single year. So you can already be ideating, months out and think what's interesting around this time. And if you get, you can always think of the special campaigns later. But as you start putting out content around those seasonal markers that are always happening for you, you can always rejigger them, see what worked, see what didn't work, and you have that content sitting there. So that's a little bit even easier for like the local market.
Yeah. Well, and then we evaluate like what worked really well and what didn't. So when you're saying seasonal markers, if we did something that did really well, we make sure next December we're going to do it again, because people think, but I already did that. there are podcasts I've done 3 years in a row, and every August it's the same podcast, and people are excited for that podcast because they want to hear, well, what tweaks did you make this year? Like, what's different from last time? So it's exciting. Let continue to repurpose.
And for me, it's a little bit different because from the partnerships, the event management side, I am not the one actually creating the content, but any plan I go into and any relationship I enter is, how are we going to create something that has a long shelf life? You can host a beautiful event, you can attend a trade show, but if you're only talking to the 500 or 600 people who are there and you can't tell a longer story with it, it's not as impactful. So any of the relationships that I help Office Depot enter into, it's, so how do we get a blog post out of this? How do we create Instagram content? How can we create an article that we can then post on our LinkedIn and share out in our small business communities? So a little bit different, but kind of the same thing.
And another thing, just to add to that, because I was thinking about it, is a lot of this stuff, especially seasonal, can be, even though it's there, can be evergreen, or like you said about going back and listening to old content. Like Stacy and I both did interviews on each other's podcasts. I'm still getting people who are like, oh, I just listened to this podcast episode and I came to you, and vice versa. And it just kind of lives in perpetuity. And the stuff that we were saying at the time is evergreen for the most part. Business advice and what's going on in business, even if some of it might be what's happening this second, a lot of it's timeless.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up too, because this little meeting we have here is through that. It was through hearing a podcast and hearing Stacy, and I think she was a guest on your podcast in this instant. And I was like, and Stephanie was like, oh man, we need to get both of them on at the same time. And that was like priority number one when that happened. And I'm really happy that that's what we're doing right now. But it's a really good point that, I mean, just putting that out there, even if you did it last year, doesn't mean it won't. How many people haven't seen it, right? Versus how many people have seen it every year. There's always more people that haven't seen it versus who have, in my opinion. So
that's actually a huge point on content too. Now that you sparked that idea for me, so many people are like, oh, I posted that on Instagram. Like I talked about this thing a month ago. And it's like with algorithms and people, like, don't think that everybody's watching every move that you're making. If it performed well and people were into that topic, if you just like, honestly, if you probably posted the exact same thing with a different photo, you'd probably get a great response the same exact way with a new group of people. Like that's just, and you're not going to alienate the people who'd be like, oh, I maybe saw this before, if they even remember that. As I've grown, like my business 2 years ago is very different than the way it looks now. I have had to now be relentless with my time and just figuring out when I'm productive, when I'm not productive, what needs to happen. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I'm not somebody who's super type A, like I love to make lists. I'm not that person. But you need to be when it comes to the time. So like even for me, I know exactly when the best time for me is to actually be creative. I know when, after a certain time, and just for me personally, I know that like every piece of work I try to do will just go slower and slower. So in the evening, that is like reserved for, my family, my personal life, and doing it that way. And obviously there's seasons where you get more busy, but making sure to block off that time, or at least that time in the morning, because you can literally always worry about something in your business and optimize and work yourself to death if you want to.
Okay. So one of my pain points for blocking off time, which is great advice. Of course, I mean, I hear this advice, but I also see a lot of people ignoring said advice, even though they know it's good advice. I don't know if it's the way we were raised. I think it might be the way I was raised. I hope my dad doesn't hear this. I think I'm blaming him for it. But at the same time, I have this mentality of if I'm not working hard, then I'm wasting time. And I hear that a lot from a lot of business owners in particular, especially ones who do everything in their business. Do you find it difficult to block off that time? Do you have to mentally write it? Do you have to mentally say it to yourself, or maybe write it down, or actually block things off in a physical calendar?
100% my Google Calendar. If it's not on my Google Calendar, it's not going to happen. And I will actually say no appointments, and I'll just cross off that afternoon or that week, whatever that is. So I think that's a really important thing, is that it's you're not just thinking, oh, I'm going to be less busy next week, but you're actually almost acting like you do have something on Friday, and it is the time to rest. And one of the things that's hard for me is, if I take off on a Friday, I might feel like that sense of guilt, or how many emails am I going to have to go check later on when I catch back up? Or so one thing that I really like to do is I really take a break when the holidays come up. So I take off the whole weekend of Thanksgiving, the entire week of Christmas and New Year's, because what's nice is everybody else is too, which means less email. No one's expecting you to answer. And I think as an entrepreneur, it just feels like less pressure knowing that there's not going to be as many emails. I don't know about you, but Friday is the least amount of emails I get all week. So I know if I want to take a break, Friday's going to be a great day to do that, because and they're not expecting a response on Friday. They're thinking as long as she's getting it by Monday, that's typical. So I really take advantage of those real breaks.
And I don't want to act like this is super easy. I know, Jason, actually, we went to high school together, but we didn't really know each other in school. But the world that we did come from, that high school was pretty much relentless about, I can't tell you, that's probably where I learned how to work so hard. It made college super easy. Like I've never had just a 9 to 5. I never knew what that meant. Like the jobs that I even had leading up to working for myself, and I worked, if not harder for myself, were always on call 24 hours a day. Like you need to jump when somebody says jump. Everything's a fire, you get fired. So I come from, frankly, years and years and years of that experience, and trying to tone that down has been a process. But the thing is, like, I had just reached points doing things myself, and even with the team, where it's like, I just want to keep working. I cannot be the leader I need to be. I cannot run this business at the optimum level if I'm not taking care of myself. It just ends up being, for a lot of people, it ends up being that wall, like that you have to hit some sort of wall to feel like, oh no, like I actually need to make that change.
I think definitely being on a team that appreciates and knows the importance of work-life balance is great. If you are on a day off, you're not expected to respond to your email. And like Stacy said, there is that guilt, but we only put that on ourselves. So sometimes we're our own worst enemy with that. So doing one little thing every day for yourself, whether it's putting on a face mask, reading a book, listening to a podcast, having some chocolate, just doing that one little thing to get yourself out of that crazy headspace, because we are running 24/7. So some of the ways that I help manage it. A little wine doesn't help either, or it does help. It does help. It does help.
And just to piggyback to what Stephanie said, the being present is huge. Like I know how unsexy it is, but like I was talking to my husband about it. I'm like, I actually need to treat like all my relationships like a business. I need to schedule the time. I need to put in the work. And when I'm doing the thing that I'm doing, or whatever it is, the date night or the time where we're watching crappy TV, I need to be there. And so it's just kind of compartmentalizing it. And like I said, it's not easy. It doesn't sound super sexy, but when you're in it and if you're present, like you don't think about like, oh, I should be working, if you're actually enjoying the time that you're having doing the other thing.
Yeah. So one of the really cool things about Office Depot is we literally will take care of doing the things that everybody, regardless if you're just shopping for your kids or your family or for your business. A lot of people don't know that we can create customized, basically anything, pens, baseball caps, coffee mugs, things like that. And so thinking ahead to say, I want to get my logo or my brand name on 400 pads of paper and get pens, and then I want to ship those out. Just being aware of businesses that can kind of do a lot of things for you. So you can come to an Office Depot store, you can order all of that, you can get it shipped, you can have your custom cards or your business cards printed all in one trip. So I think kind of going back to what we were all saying before, maximizing your time. It's so crazy during the holidays. You don't want to be running to 400 different stores to put together one gift. So if you can check out and optimize your time, use retailers or online businesses that do a lot of different functions for you so that you're much more efficient. And that's one of the great things that Depot is doing. Even if you needed to go and buy like a book of stamps to send your Christmas cards or your holiday cards, that's another thing.
Right. You could buy your stamps there and then mail them out there. Like that's
exactly.
Awesome. Yes.
And definitely having a list to keep yourself organized. I am a list person through and through. And so it really helps during the holidays.
As we gear up for 2020, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, all over again, what's something you're taking into 2020 that you've learned this year?
I have recently had to make some really tough decisions, and along the lines of hiring, firing, just team. And I do take a little bit longer than I should firing. And I had to really realize that as hard as it is, I really need to say what's the best, like what's the best thing for the business right now? And am I holding the business back because I'm uncomfortable doing something that I don't like to do? You know, as a business owner, there are going to be things we don't love to do, but hopefully that's like this much compared to, you know, the 90% of things you do love as an entrepreneur. So that's definitely something I'm going to be better at for 2020.
And for to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Stacy's saying is, I've definitely entered a season of my business where you have to make hard decisions and yeah, hiring and firing and scaling and implementing all of these different things. So for me, it's being incredibly, like we're talking about time management, mindful and intentional in both my business and personal life. Why am I doing certain things? To take a look around. It's so easy to get caught up and just, for me, like to just want to create content and be in that creative space. And there's all these other aspects of my business that, you know, we'd like to do the thing that we're good at. But if you're owning a business, you need to handle the other stuff and put the right people in place and see if everything is actually going, like if you're avoiding the financials, you need to take that time and schedule it in. And we live in a world right now where there are so many tools and different ways that we can scale ourselves and reach more people. Just remembering that nothing needs to be done in a certain way. So just being intentional overall going into 2020.
And for me with Office Depot, one of the things that I've learned a lot in 2019 that I want to take into 2020 is you need to evolve or you're going to die, right? There's that old saying, evolve or die. Who would have thought 5 years ago that a company like Office Depot had the opportunity to sit down with people like Brittany and Stacy and have these conversations and really position ourselves as a place for advice and advocacy for small business owners. Everybody just assumes this is where I get my paper, this is where I get my ink, not as a resource. And so for me in 2020, it's continuing to push the envelope, continuing to evolve, continuing to reach out to new partners that people would never expect. But when you have that, oh, duh, that makes a lot of sense moment, that's when the beauty happens.
So my podcast is Foot Traffic, and then you can also go to foottrafficformula.com. You'll see my website there. But I am on social media everywhere at Stacy Tuschl.
I guess I'll go next. Basically, I would be really bad at my job if you couldn't find me using my name. So it's Brittany, Ttany, and just for the spelling, Krystle is Krystle. And if you go to brittanykrystle.com, you can find the Beyond Influential podcast there. You can find links to all of my other social media, but if you look up Brittany Krystle, you will find me.
And then for all things Office Depot, we are at Office Depot, officedepot.com. And for me personally, I am everywhere at Schwartz15. And I'm constantly sharing on LinkedIn all the really cool content we're creating for Office Depot as well.
That is awesome. And then if you have any more questions with Stephanie, Stacy, Brittany, or just in general, you can always come back to our Office Depot group, specifically for business owners. I think Brittany's in there, but I will be inviting Stacy right after this. You know, most of our guests are in there, and I have found that a lot of business owners like to share their experiences, and that's something also that I am going to say that's my advice for 2020 is to join more communities that are not necessarily like-minded, but have the same goal that you have. That is also what this Office Depot business group is about. It's business owners sharing their experiences and finding pain points that we all have in common and coming to find solutions for them. So,
and now I have one more tip now that I thought about it, now that you mentioned with the Q&A, going into Facebook groups, sourcing from your audience the questions that they want to hear or the common ones that you see related to your industry. If you're sitting there and you have no ideas, just see what Google autocompletes, go into those groups, look at those questions and, write on your thoughts. And I do that for Pinterest, YouTube, Google, Quora. They're all search engines. So yeah, use it to your advantage and that's free.
Thank you so much, Stacy, Brittany, and Stephanie. I'm Jason Eisenberg, and thank you for sticking with us and learning how you can bring foot traffic to your brick and mortar or retail store. Have a great holidays.